The Manilow Method podcast is a production by Logan Allen and me, Barry Harris. Now, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Logan Allen, that's Barry Harris. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Manilow Method. We are way into our second season now, and we're coming at you today with a conversation that's going to be a little different than what you might be used to if you've watched us before. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We are the complete guide to the music of Barry Manilow. Go check us out. We've got a bunch of other videos. We've got a whole other season, but right now we're going to be talking about something very important in the Manilow catalog, and it is the only movie that Barry Manilow himself was ever in. We are talking today about Copacabana. Yes, her name was Lola, the song we all know. It was made into a movie. The plot of the movie is based on the song. If you know the lyrics, it's very much a story song. The movie is based on the song. It's got Tony, it's got Lola, it's got Rico, it's got all of these characters that we know from the song, but it's a 90-minute made-for-TV movie. In fact, it was the first made-for-television movie musical. It premiered on CBS on December 3rd, 1985. And honestly, even though it's Manilow's only dive into the cinema universe, I think this is actually a fantastic watch. I don't think it's a miss. You can't really tell he didn't act before. He was very into it, and it's such a fantastic watch from start to finish. So much great music, such a great plot, such great writing. I really believe that this could be considered a lost classic movie from the 80s. So, Barry, this is a big deal because we've talked about music videos, but this is really the only chance we're going to get to discuss a Barry Manilow movie. So maybe kind of give a synopsis of what we're going to be talking about today and what your feelings are on the subject at hand.
Yes, so I believe this was a landmark moment in Barry Manilow's career. As many of you who've been watching our program know, that we present all of the albums out of sequence. We don't go chronologically necessarily. However, if you have been watching since the beginning, there is a bit of a pattern that began in 1978 when he got involved with the film Foul Play. And one of the interesting details that I learned through my research is that Barry Manilow did an interview on Good Morning America in 1978 to promote the third Barry Manilow special, and during that interview he mentioned that he had signed to an agent. Her name was Sue Mengers, and she was a high-powered agent, and so this was a signal that he was open to work. And we've also, through research and reporting, we found that there were two projects that were pitched to Barry Manilow in the interim. One was the lead role in the movie Airplane. That has been documented that the studio had the idea to offer it to Barry Manilow, the lead role. And of course, that did not work out. And then there were also reports that there was talks of a movie with Frank Sinatra starring and Barry Manilow cast in the role of his son. And Barry Manilow has actually commented on the record about that in a newspaper interview that I read in the early 1980s, where he confirmed that it was something that was talked about, but it was not something that was going to be going forward. And then in 1982, Barry Manilow was cast in a Goldie Hawn after-school special where he played himself, but he also acted in some skits. So it was like he was trying to get into this world. He was very serious about it, and he began taking acting lessons with Nita Foch, who is a renowned coach and teacher for students. She taught Manilow how to act out his songs on stage and how to break them down. So working with Nita Foch really helped Manilow enhance his presentation skills as a performer, but he was really in the back of his mind still wanting to be an actor. So he finally made that come true in the Copacabana movie, because he called up Dick Clark. He cold called Dick Clark and said, I want to write and star in a movie, and it's going to be a movie version of Copacabana. And so Bruce Sussman, Jack Feldman, his lyrical collaborators, got to work on Copacabana, and due to the timeline, Barry Manilow had to actually write the music to this Copacabana soundtrack while he was on tour. So he had to have it arranged that every time he stayed somewhere, they had to have a grand piano in a ballroom so he could write the music in the afternoon before the show or late in the evening after the show. So that's how all of this was written, and it led up to this big moment. And I think maybe I'll save some comments for later into Barry Manilow's retrospective thoughts about this, because he has shared some of his retrospective thoughts on the record. We'll talk about that maybe later, but what I'll say personally about this, I love this movie. This movie was perfect. It has everything. It's family-friendly fun. There's nothing particularly gory, and there's no swearing in it, except hell. But that's probably the worst thing that happens in the movie. So this is something you can actually sit down and watch with the family. It's very entertaining. You'll laugh. Maybe you'll cry. But one thing I'll say before we move on is a lot of people might think, well, what's the point of adapting a 3-minute song into a movie? Because the 3-minute song Copacabana tells a complete story. What else is there to tell? Well, what I will say to that is there's actually more to tell. And in fact, we won't tell you what happens at the end, but if you think you know what happens at the end, you don't. That's why you actually have to watch the movie, and you learn a whole lot more about something that is implied in the song, but you really don't know. But when you see the movie, I think the song will make a whole lot more sense. So that's why this was worth doing.
I think it's interesting that the song itself is spread across 3 verses, where the first verse introduces us to Tony and Lola and their love story. The second verse, we get introduced to Rico and the gunshot, who shot who, and then you get the third verse, which is kind of the epilogue, if you would like, about Lola after what happens in the second verse. And I think it's interesting that the movie decided to kind of live in the first verse for a long time before it decided to move on to where the rest of the story goes. And I think that's a unique way of, like you said, taking a 3-minute song and stretching it out to a full-length movie. I really think this was beautifully done. In fact, before I knew this movie existed, I just assumed Copacabana was the story song everybody knew. I didn't know that there was a way to potentially add more to the story that I had known my entire life. So the first time I ever watched this it came up as an episode on Manilow TV. Manilow TV, the subscription service that Barry Manilow has, you watch usually a bunch of concerts, but every now and then the Copacabana movie will show up as an episode on there. So that's where I first saw it, and I watched it a few times whenever it would come up. But man, just rewatching it for this episode really reminded me how much detail was put into it and how much they were actually able to pull from the 3.5-minute song from 1978. So Barry, there is a lot to talk about as far as how this album was released. The soundtrack was released as an album. By slip of the tongue, I started talking about an album like we usually do, but the soundtrack was released in different forms. Walk us through that, because this is one of the first episodes on our show where I actually don't have anything physical. So we're going to cut to Barry's angle right now, and he's going to show you a bunch of stuff.
Yes, and so interestingly, you mentioned that, Logan, that this is a bit hard to find. There is a reason for that, and I'll explain that in a second. So first, let me hold up the LP. This is the Copacabana soundtrack. It's a gatefold, however, it is not 2 records. It's just 1 record, but they make it a gatefold so you can see all of the photos from the movie. And then, of course, here is the back. I'll show that to you all. Here's what's interesting about how this was released, Logan. This was not commercially released in record stores. One way to obtain a copy of the Copacabana movie soundtrack was to mail away for it using instructions that were included in certain copies of the Manilow RCA record from 1985. There was also another way to obtain a copy. What you had to do to get it is that you had to go to McDonald's.
Which, fun fact, I've never been to McDonald's in my life, so Do with that what you will.
Good for you.
I've been to every other place. It's just been a thing. I've never been there. But please, we're getting off task already.
So anyway, you had to earn points through purchases and send in receipts in order to get this record. And interestingly, this was the second release on RCA Records for Barry Manilow. As many of you know, Arista Records was his longtime home, and the number of records he's done outside of Arista is very far and few between. And this was one of them. He did only 3 recording projects with RCA Records. And we mentioned in our last episode, we actually did cover the pop album that Barry Manilow released on RCA Records in 1985, the self-titled Manilow album. And one of the things we mentioned there was that RCA, the record company, lured Manilow over, and the executives who signed him to the deal were no longer at the company at the time when the album was released. So therefore, his Manilow 1985 album suffered, and that's what I think happened here to the Copacabana soundtrack. I think it got relegated to this whatever promotion this was through McDonald's because they just wanted to burn it off, which is a shame. So I think for that reason this soundtrack got buried. So I showed you the vinyl record. There was also a cassette version, which actually I don't have. I've never been able to track that down, but there was apparently a cassette version. But even more rare, in 1985 in Japan, they released a CD, and for many years it was the hardest to find CD. The CD price on eBay in the 1990s would go north of $200 because that was the only way for you to hear the music. Now, in the late 90s, there was a little bit of a reprieve, and there was a reissue that was a fan club exclusive. However, there was a very big problem. The track listing, the mastering was done wrong, where Big City Blues is ending, and then Sweet Heaven, Hey Down There starts, and then the track stops, and then it goes on to the next track, and it starts over with Hey Down There. So 7-8-year-old me was listening to this and wondering what in the world is wrong with this. So about a couple months later, they did another issue where they corrected it, and they advertised it as being remastered from the original tapes, and it sounds way better. But here's one thing I just want to say to all of you out there that want to go to the secondary market to buy this. These two look exactly the same on the outside. And so, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. There is one difference. One of them has a picture disc, and this is a picture of the Copacabana soundtrack. You can see right there. And then the other one, this is the older one, does not have the picture disc. You need to find the one with the picture disc. This one. Make sure you see the album. I'm sorry, I have this upside down. Make sure you can see the album cover on the CD, because if you don't see that, it's the old reissued. Beware. So, yes, like I said, this is buried in obscurity, but luckily now that's not too much of a problem because of streaming services. Copacabana soundtrack is on streaming services, so you can listen to it right now after you're done watching and listening to our program if you don't know about the Copacabana soundtrack.
So at this point, I would typically take us through a laundry list of musicians, guitarists, bassists, drummers of the albums that we're talking about. But today, we're talking about a movie. So I'm going to list some of the big names from the cast and some behind-the-scenes people, and then we're just going to get straight into talking about some of our favorite moments, some of the highlights, and the musical numbers on the soundtrack. So Barry Manilow stars as Tony Starr, formerly Tony Stern. Watch the movie to find out what that means. Annette O'Toole stars as the lovely Lola Lamar. And then here is a name that is pretty crazy to say was in Barry Manilow's only movie. Estelle Getty plays Bella Stern, Tony's mom. Barry, how do we know Estelle Getty?
Yes, Estelle Getty is one of the Golden Girls. And in fact, Estelle Getty was a Broadway performer. She had not found any particular fame or anything, but in 1984 or 1985, she went on a trip to Los Angeles that her agent made her go on so she could go on auditions. And when she was on that trip, she did 2 auditions. One was for the Copacabana movie, and on the same trip, she auditioned for the Golden Girls. And Barry Manilow recently told the story that when they were apparently doing a rehearsal or a table read-through, some sort of activity, when he and Estelle were together, she stepped out to take a call, and that phone call was telling her that she was booked on the pilot of the Golden Girls. So Estelle Getty went from playing Barry Manilow's mom and went to playing Sophia, one of the most beloved characters in sitcom history. Imagine that.
So another actor in the movie, he plays Rico Castelli. His name is Joseph Bologna. We couldn't really agree on how to pronounce it, so I asked Google, and they said it is Joseph Bologna. He plays Rico Castelli, who shot who at the Copacabana. Now, a couple of people from behind the scenes that are important to mention. The screenwriter is a man named James Lipton. Barry, tell us a little bit about James Lipton.
Yes, so James Lipton will be known to a generation of viewers of Bravo as the host of Inside the Actors Studio. He has graced the stage with many legends and getting them to open up in ways that they never had before. And I think James Lipton is well known in this role, but it was not well known what he did before Inside the Actors Studio. But what's great about what James Lipton did specifically to the Copacabana movie is that he took the role of Tony Starr and integrated facts about Barry Manilow's life into the movie. So when you watch this movie, you feel like it's a little bit autobiographical. It even goes as far as to including his missing father as a plot element. Barry Manilow did not have his biological father in his life, and that's the same case with Tony Starr, the main character in the movie.
And we mentioned before, the executive producer of Copacabana, the movie, is none other than Mr. Dick Clark of American Bandstand fame. Barry Manilow and Dick Clark, long-time friends. And Manilow absolutely needed to have Dick Clark on this movie, and I think Dick Clark did an absolutely phenomenal job on this film. So we're going to jump in to some tracks that we think are important to mention, some stuff on the soundtrack, stuff that's unique to the movie, and a couple little Easter eggs hidden throughout the movie, because not only are there personal details about Barry Manilow hidden throughout the plot in the movie, there are also some Barry Manilow songs hidden in the plot throughout the movie. So we're going to mention some of those as we go along as well. So we're going to start with the Overture. Now, this is a classic Overture style of Overture. You're getting the big moments from the big songs. You know, Sweet Heaven obviously leads into Copa and the first scene and everything, but I really think it's a beautiful way to start the movie. Typically when I watch movies that start with a little bit of a drawn out opening credit scene, I typically just fast forward through it. But this Overture actually held my attention, and I think it's really beautiful, and it's a great way to lead into this movie, and it's a great way to lead into how we first meet Lola, and then we eventually meet Tony Barry. What do you think of how the movie starts?
I love this Overture. I believe this was Artie Butler's arrangement, and it's absolutely exquisite. Such an exciting way to open the movie.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the first legit new song in the movie. It's a song called Let's Go Steppin'. It's performed by the Copa showgirls in the Copacabana showroom. This is very interesting, and something that I would be interested to know is, considering the fact that Caramba, a song we're going to talk about later, found its way into the actual Manilow live show with him singing it. Even though it's sung by the showgirls in the movie, he sings it live in concert. Do you think, Barry, that there's potentially a Manilow sung version of Let's Go Steppin' out there somewhere?
Well, I think as the composer of the music, I think at some point in the process, he had to sing something. There has to be some sort of document, probably a demo at the very least. I don't know how that process works, and it would be interesting, and we'll talk about that more when we get into some other songs in this soundtrack, but I'm trying to imagine. I don't know if this is a song that would be in his style or something that he would sing, but we also never know if he made an attempt to adapt it to his own style. There's a lot of experimentation that he could have attempted that we don't know about.
So something I want to bring up about the scene where Let's Go Steppin' happens, it actually happens right before Let's Go Steppin' happens. But Tony and Lola are having dinner at the Copacabana, and if you listen very carefully in the background, the band that is playing is actually playing the song Night Song from 2 a.m. Paradise Cafe. And as soon as I heard that the first time, I had to pause and write it down, and I immediately started listening more intently to see, okay, anytime there's music playing, what is it? So there's going to be a couple moments of that where you actually hear Manilow songs in the background of this movie, which I think is just a masterfully done move when it comes to scoring this movie, because they could have just put in a standard. They could have put in a big band standard, but they chose to put Barry Manilow songs under the dialogue of a Barry Manilow movie, which for people like Barry Harris and Logan Allen here on the Manilow Method, that's just gold. It's absolute gold. Barry, what else do you have to say about this first scene?
Yeah, well, the first scene that I love is when they meet as part of a radio competition, and it's very interesting to hear the songs that they sing. And this is really, Logan, the only time when outside songs come into the movie. They're licensed to be sung as part of a singing competition. You have to be able to listen to a tune that a big band is playing and then sing the correct lyrics, and you win based on singing the correct lyrics. And funny enough, I believe there's a couple of songs. There's Party Boy is at the Chattanooga Choo Choo is a song that Barry Manilow went on to record himself later. So I have a feeling that he may have handpicked songs that were very special to him.
Again, because there's so many personal details to Barry Manilow in this script, I feel like everything in this movie was something personal to him, something that he personally had his hand in choosing to be featured in the film. So we're going to move forward a little bit. We find out that Lola's job is... It turns out to be a job that she's not too fond of. Again, we're going to try not to give everything away here. We're sorry if you haven't seen the movie, but we're going to try to hold some spoilers back from you if you actually are able to see this in the future. We find out Lola's job, and in turn, Tony finds out Lola's job. And before Tony finds out her job, we actually get introduced to his mom, Estelle Getty. We get introduced to her as they're having a meal together, and his mom doesn't quite appeal to his new job at the Copacabana. She wants him to play at Carnegie Hall. She wants him to be a composer, and he's looking to be a piano player in a lounge somewhere, but now he's going to bartend at the Copacabana. So Barry, give us some thoughts on the dynamic between Tony Starr and his mom.
Yeah, and like you said, Logan, this could be art imitating life, that he may have had a difficult time having people in his life reconcile with what he was doing. And I think that's something that a lot of artists and creative people can relate to. So right off the bat, you get an emotional scene, a heart-tugging scene that, yeah, like I said, a lot of people, I think, can relate to the emotions of it. And again, Estelle Getty, she's a fantastic actress, and I'm glad that she's using her full range of skills here in this movie. So the first time we actually see Tony tending bar, as it says in the song Copacabana, we get what I believe is an insane cameo in the Copacabana lounge. We open on the lounge, and you see Tony at the bar, and he's a klutz. He's, spraying the drinks all over the place. He's dropping everything. Oh, here, take this. But he's all over the place. And we pan to the piano player and the people gathered around the piano, and he's for those of you who know this song, that is I Was a Fool from the Even Now album. The piano player, once again, is playing a hidden Manilow gem in the movie. And I say he's playing, well, he's kind of doing this and taking drinks in between lines, and he's very obviously an alcoholic. And it's hysterical to watch because the man playing the piano player is Artie Butler, the guy who arranges so many fantastic Manilow songs and has such a hand in Manilow's success. He's playing a drunk in a piano bar, playing a Manilow deep cut. Barry,
What was your first reaction when you watched this movie and realized that that was Artie Butler?
So here's the funny thing, Logan. I've seen the movie many times when I was a kid, but it was after many viewings when I sat down, read all the credits, and I saw the Copa pianist was Artie Butler. I went, whoa, I couldn't believe it. And here's what makes it even funnier. A couple of years ago, one of the podcasters that I follow, Terry Woolman, he interviews music industry insiders, and he did an interview with Artie Butler, and I listened to it, and what comes through to me is that Artie Butler seems like the sweetest and kindest person. And so the fact that he's playing a washed-up drunk is absolutely hilarious. I love this cameo.
So one of the ways that Tony justifies to his mom that he's going to attend bar and try to play piano at the Copa is he's going to make ends meet with that job, and it's a night job. So during the day, he can go around and pitch his music to record executives and try to get his song sold. He wants to be a songwriter. That is his end goal in this movie, is he wants to sell his music. And oh boy, do we get a dandy of a scene trying to demonstrate this. There is a song that he plays called Changin' My Tune, where he goes to a record executive's office and he sits down at the piano and he's playing this song, you know, just having a great old time. And the record executive is on the phone laughing, talking to somebody else. He's not paying attention, and he hangs up. And I have to say, this is one scene that I think we kind of want to give away because it's so hysterical that you just need to go watch it. The record exec is like, it's so yesterday. That the feel of the song is so yesterday. And Manilow's like, well, if it's yesterday, then what's today? And then the exec goes, it's Latin, kid. Think Carmen Miranda. And he hits the Ole pose that Manilow hits in concert, which I think is just hilarious. So anyway, he leaves. And then he goes to another executive. He plays the same exact song, but this time in a Latin groove. And he finishes, and the executive says, well, that's all nice, kid, but nobody listens to that anymore. And he's like, well, but Latin's today. And he's like, who cares about today? Tomorrow's what we're selling. What will people want tomorrow? Swing is the thing. So he goes, and he goes to another record executive. And he plays Changin' My Tune in a swing style, and the guy falls asleep and he's snoring by the end. It is probably my favorite sequence in this movie. Like, every time I watch it, it's hysterical. Barry, what do you think of Changin' My Tune?
Funny, coincidentally, I also think this is my favorite part of the movie just because it speaks to me. I've had my own personal experiences where I come in with something that I feel is from the heart, and someone wants to give feedback on how to make it more contemporary, and that's the thing. It's so subjective. What is hot and today? You could do today or tomorrow, and I love that. And I wonder if, like I said, is art imitating life? Does this parallel things that really happened to Manilow? Has he ever had that experience with any particular song of his? Well, it may have happened a little bit with Could It Be Magic, because it was a beautiful ballad, and then it got turned into pretty much, I guess you would call it, a bubblegum pop record by Tony Orlando, and he hated that experience. And of course, he finally did get to produce Could It Be Magic the way that he wanted to produce it, and he had a top 10 hit with it. So I think this was a great way to send up that experience, and like I said, I related personally to it, and I'm so glad this scene is immortalized in the movie. It's definitely my favorite.
So the next kind of big thing we need to talk about is the song that Lola sings for her auditions. It's a song called Man Wanted. She puts on this nice red dress, and she lays on top of a piano, and it's this very dramatic, Man Wanted. It's this very dramatic song. And the first scene that we see her sing this, the club owner is kind of getting a little handsy with her. And it's very obvious that the people who are watching her audition are just going to try to take advantage of her. They're not going to take her seriously as an artist, as a singer, as a performer. So once Tony and Lola kind of get together, Tony tries to jazz up the arrangement, and she gets confused because she's like, but it's so slow, it's so dramatic. And I love his line saying, "And how many parts have you gotten with this song?" And she goes, "Well, none yet." And he goes, "Exactly." So he changes the arrangement and gives it a big ending, and then that's a scene later in the movie where we see her actually get a job through Tony's new arrangement, which I think is such an imitation of what Barry Manilow did with Bette Midler. I think that is an exact rip of what that dynamic would have been like in the late 60s into the early 70s. I totally think that's what it would be. Barry, what do you think of Man Wanted?
Yeah, I love the fact, again, incorporating parts of Manilow's life into this movie. And what's so fascinating in that dialogue when they're trying to figure out the arrangement, he says, it's not this song, it's this arrangement. We should give it a faster tempo, and then we'll change the key. That always works.
I love that line. So I wrote that down specifically. That is hilarious. The fact that Barry Manilow is saying, "Oh yeah, the key change always works." Well, duh, it always works. It's in every single one of his hits.
Exactly. And so it's a great example of showing how sometimes a new song is not what you need, but it's a better presentation, a better key for a vocalist to sing in. Again, there's a lot of practical information that's given to you in rapid fire. And that's the thing about this movie, is that people like us who are musicians, we can relate to all of this. So if you are a very musically inclined person, this movie is really for you.
So we have hit, I would say, what's about to be the pinnacle of new material in the Copacabana movie. I know Barry is really gearing up to talk about this moment. So once Tony and Lola are actually befriended and she trusts him now, they're walking home, and something that I think is hysterical is the fact that Tony Starr plays the accordion.
Yeah.
If you've seen live footage of Manilow from the early 80s, it was always a bit where he picks up the accordion. It was the first instrument he learned to play, and he plays a bunch of modern songs on the accordion. It's such a hilarious bit, but I think it's so funny that Tony actually plays the accordion in the movie, and they start talking about how Tony is a songwriter. And Lola just says, "Well, write me a song." He goes, "Okay, I will when we get home." And she goes, "No, right now." They're in an alleyway. They're just in the middle of a road, and he's got an accordion on, and she's sitting on the bed of a truck, and she's like, "Write me a song right now." So he starts making up some cheesy lyrics, and then he slowly the look on his face changes, and he starts to sing, "You were in my dreams." And this is the start of the big ballad from Copacabana, the movie, "Who Needs to Dream." Now, Barry, I know this is one of your favorite songs. You could sit here and talk for hours about it. So please give us what makes this scene and this song so iconic.
Yeah, so let me start with the very personal part about this song. It is in my top 5 of favorite Manilow songs of all time, "Who Needs to Dream," and it is also my parents' wedding song. So for that reason, this has a very special place in my heart. But if you're watching the movie, before this scene, when he's back at his home, when he's playing the piano, he's playing the melody to "Who Needs to Dream." So clearly in his mind, in the character's mind, he has this melody, he has these chords, but he doesn't have the right words. And in the moment, what you're seeing is he suddenly has the perfect words. And this is probably one of Barry Manilow's most beautiful love songs ever sung. There's a story in 1992. Oprah Winfrey had Barry Manilow on to promote the complete collection and then some, and that's where Barry Manilow debuted his new single called "The Best of Me." He sang it publicly for the first time, and when he finished it, Oprah just dissolved into tears, and they had to stop the tape because she needed to collect herself. And why I bring that up is because the one and only time in the 21st century that Barry Manilow played Who Needs to Dream Live, I was there for. It was in Denver, Colorado. It was a very special midnight show that was done the evening after the final performance of his last ever tour, his last ever long-scale domestic tour from coast to coast. That was the one last time tour in 2016. And to open up the show, they brought the curtain up and he went into Who Needs to Dream. I turned into Oprah Winfrey so fast. I had no idea what was going to happen. And I felt every emotion. I urge everybody, if you don't know this song, to go listen to it, because not only is the song so beautiful, but the performance is so beautiful. The production is so beautiful. The orchestration is so beautiful. It will move you. Now, I do have some historical context for this. So Who Needs to Dream was actually debuted live before anybody heard it in the movie. It was debuted in 1984 on the opening night of the Paradise Tour, which was to promote his 2 a.m. Paradise Cafe album. And what is shocking is that the version he played in 1984 was different from the final version on the Copacabana movie. The music was different, and when he introduced it, he told the audience that it was based on Puccini's Toreador, and the melody was different. So the melody of Who Needs to Dream that we all know is Who Needs to Dream When There Is You. When he sang it live for the first time, the melody was Who needs to dream when there is you? And that is based directly on the Puccini melody, the way he originally wrote it. So between that time and when he did the final version, that was removed, and the specific and direct references to Puccini were taken out. The one thing that did remain was For My Whole Life Through. That's a melody that's in the original Puccini, but the rest of it was taken out. And I don't know if that was for artistic reasons or if that was for licensing reasons, but he did substantially rework the melody to Who Needs to Dream before he eventually recorded it and put it on the Copacabana movie. So there's a little interesting fact for you all. If you watch Manilow TV, like we mentioned, you might see the opening night of the Paradise Tour, and if that comes on, be sure to watch that, because you're going to hear the original version of Who Needs to Dream.
So we're gonna shift topics here for a second and talk now about another big example of a piece of Manilow's life being integrated into the Copacabana movie, and that is the fact that his estranged father shows up. He is playing the piano in the Copa bar. Also, he's playing What Am I Doing Here from the Paradise Cafe record, so another little shout out there to a Manilow classic. And there's a man sitting at the piano who introduces himself as his father. Barry, what is movie Manilow's father's story?
Yeah, so he walked out of his life when he was young, and interestingly, that happened to Barry Manilow in real life. His father walked out on him, and then after a show is over, this guy comes into his dressing room and says, "Hi, I'm your father." It happened exactly like it does in the movie. So that's what I think is just so amazing. And of course, the character reestablishes his relationship with his father in the movie. Unfortunately, it does not appear that Manilow got to do that in real life. So that's the part where the art departs from real life, and then his father ends up providing him help when they are trying to help Lola, who gets into trouble. And so I love the fact that they add this twist in that really, again, gives you a movie that has heart in it. Yes, there's laughs, but there's also emotions and real heart. And I love the fact that he is eventually reunited with his father, and then he and his father join forces.
And one more thing that's really interesting, the fact that Manilow meets his estranged father in the piano bar. We kind of mentioned earlier how he got the gig. Artie Butler, as we mentioned, the drunken piano player, we see a second shot of him playing the same exact song from earlier. He's still playing I Was a Fool. between lines, taking a drink, and the people finally get so annoyed, he gets fired. Manilow sits at the piano, kicks into the new arrangement of Man Wanted, and that's how Lola gets the gig as a Copa girl, and how Manilow gets the gig as the piano lounge piano player. So that is how we get that gig. So it's very important to mention. And now, let's shift into a fantastic moment, a fantastic song, one of the highlights of the movie for me. The song is called Ay Caramba. This song I mentioned earlier in this episode, it actually found its way into Manilow's live show. He would open his second act on the Paradise Tour, which turned into the Copacabana tour once the movie was being promoted. He would open with Copacabana, then he would do Ay Caramba, then he would do Sweet Heaven. He did a Copacabana mini set in his live stage show. Ay Caramba is such an infectious song, and I think it's important that we bring up some similarities it has to the future Manilow track, Hey Mambo. Barry, let's tinfoil hat. Let's speculate here. Give me some ideas.
Yeah, so interestingly, I had a question, and I had wondered about the song Hey Mambo, which is on the Swing Street album that came out in 1987 after this project. And Jack Feldman and Bruce Sussman wrote the lyrics for Hey Mambo, as well as all the songs of the Copacabana soundtrack. So it made me wonder if they might be for the same project. But one thing that is interesting, though, Logan, I should mention, Tom Kelly has a co-writing credit on Hey Mambo. So there's a chance that Barry Manilow, when he was going through what Bruce Sussman called the Gray Period. This was an experimental period in 1986 where Barry Manilow was trying to find a new musical direction, so he wrote with other people. It appears that Tom Kelly is one of the people that he wrote with. So we really can't say for sure what the origin of Hey Mambo is, but it's not unlikely that a form of it existed and may have been considered, because really, if you think about it, Ay Caramba and Hey Mambo, they could be interchangeable.
Very similar.
In fact, they were interchangeable in the Barry Manilow live show. In the Paradise Tour and the Copacabana Tour, Barry Manilow would use Ay Caramba as an audience participation number. He would say Ay Caramba and make the audience go Ay Caramba. And in fact, on New Year's Eve 1986, 1985 into 1986, he played Radio City Hall. My mom was there. And we actually come to find out, Logan, that our friend Mary from New Jersey was also in the audience on that same night. That crowd was electric. When he asked them to sing Ay Caramba, they were screaming at the top of their lungs. They were so on fire. But funny enough, one of the quips Manilow would like to do when he would do the call and response with the audience, usually after the first one, he would say, well, that really sucks. Come on, let me hear you. And in 1987, starting with the Big Fun Tour de Force and the Live on Broadway show, that became Hey Mambo, where he would say, Hey Mambo, you sing it, and make the audience go, Hey Mambo. And so Ay Caramba and Hey Mambo are very interchangeable. So I think for you to have a theory that this might have been around earlier, that's not totally implausible.
Again, tinfoil hats. At some point, we're going to have to make our own tinfoil hats to actually wear on this show, because we speculate so much, ladies and gentlemen. So, unfortunately, we were planning on this being a one-part, just a little bit longer, but a one-part discussion. And we are making an impromptu audible call here. We're a ways into this, and we still have a lot to talk about. So we're going to chop this puppy in half right now, and we're just gonna give you this first part for now. A couple days from now, you'll see part 2 that we're gonna film here in a second, because there's still so many fantastic things to talk about. So I'm Logan Allen, that's Barry Harris, this is the Manilow Method, talking about the Copacabana movie. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on social media at the Manilow Method, and we'll see you for an impromptu part 2 very soon, everybody.